Welcome, everyone, to the Trailblazing Leaders podcast. It's my promise to you to bring you exceptional leaders who have demonstrated a passion for talent development and the impact it has on business growth. My guests will be discussing a range of leadership topics, from the art of high-performance teams to compassionate coaching, and importantly, the driving impact culture has on growth and revenue and profits. We're going to have the privilege to hear some incredibly compelling stories, learn about innovative practices, and gain transformative ideas from the best professionals and the most successful individuals in their industry. And if you stay with me to the end of the program, I'm going to share a special gift offer I have with all of you who attend. Let's get into it. I'm really excited to introduce today's special guest, Jess Larsen, who has recorded over 900 episodes of his podcast, Innovation and Leadership. It was ranked #1 globally in the category of innovation with over 4 million downloads. He has interviewed some of the most unique leaders, billionaires, movie stars, pro athletes, generals of the Army. Some of his guests you'll know would be Eric Wan, the founder of Zoom, Lise Cooper, the vice chair of the $1.4 trillion Templeton Fund, 4-star General Joseph Votel, and Cliff Hudson, the CEO of Sonic Drive-In, plus hundreds of other CEOs. He's just a wealth of knowledge. He is the CEO of Greystoke Productions, which enable him and his wife to afford to combat child trafficking and exploitation. In 2007, he and his wife Stephanie started the Child Rescue Association of North America, a nonprofit association dedicated to stopping trafficking and the exploitation of children. He wants to help have children have the childhood that they deserve. So, Jess, if we could just jump right in, you have spoken to over 900 unique leaders of all types, generals, people who are running wealth management. I saw $1.4 trillion in the Templeton Fund, 4-star generals, a former CEO of Sonic. Tell me your philosophy and maybe what you've learned from these hundreds of interviews about leadership.
I think one of my biggest takeaways is about like humility and self-confidence and care. You look at the span, right? And so I've had, founders, CEOs who company millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, tens of billions. And then I have had a couple in the hundreds of billions, right? And so often at the lower, like the founders and CEOs who have achieved less, it is a little more about them. It's a lot about them. And they say all the right things about like, oh, you need to have a great team, surround yourselves by great people. People need to know they matter. Like they say the right things, but their actions, the stories they tell, even just like the words they use, like their vocabulary choices, betray the fact that they're the big deal here, And it's kind of like, I think that Jim Collins' Good to Great, like tyrant with 1,000 helpers, like they've brute forced their way to these few $1 million kind of thing.
I was going to say, so what you're telling me is they say one thing, but they authentically don't really believe it because they're not at a level where they have achieved massive success where they can impact society. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it's almost more like a fundamental operating system. Like those founders who go from zero over $1 billion or into the tens of billions, I see like such like humble listening, like where so many of the other founders, they're listening to their customers, but they're mostly listening to hear how great they are. And then, they're going to fix them, like their ratio of wanting to hear how great they are and trying to like remove friction from their product and make it fit like the exact puzzle piece for the whole in their client's life. It's like on that spectrum, they're not at either extreme. Nobody is 100% either way, but like on the spectrum, they're further towards the like looking for confirmation that they're awesome.
Very interesting. Yesterday, our conversation with the global marketing head from Sony, who's on, I said, you know what? The #1 thing I learned and I practice is active listening to the other person. That ability to have empathetic, active, honest listening. And I think it's very hard for leaders to actually be present and, as you say, not be looking for validation.
And and I get it. Like, I'm not saying I'm exempt from this or something, but it's just my observation that the ones who got to the multi-billions, um, they are genuinely listening for disconfirming evidence. They are genuinely looking for the problems. Like it's not, they don't have happy ears, like they listen to all this stuff and they picked out the part about how they're great, right? They're like, that's actually not as useful to them. Like, they want to know what's wrong because it's like their worldview is, oh, we can always continue to improve. We can always continue to remove friction. And it's like they're listening very carefully for what no one on their team has heard yet. And then
Uh,
they're observing and they're like, okay, they're looking for like, I know the client said this. I know the staff said this. I know the investor said this, but what are their actions saying that their words aren't? And, what does the data say they're actually doing compared to what they say they're doing? And like, there's these observations. And then the third part of that trifecta for me is you hear them talking about like going away, being really quiet and thinking really hard about
mm,
what wasn't said, what didn't they see. And it's like they're connecting dots that hadn't been connected by others. And it's like they're willing to stop being so busy and have like busyness as a badge of honor and take like genuine time alone, away, I don't know, cell phone off, on a walk, like something like this where they're like, they just think more deeply and they value spending time to think deeply instead of everything's in a meeting with other people, just like some solitude of what they heard with their humble listening, what they observed with this, like kind of like trying to have beginner's eyes type of observations. And I think all these different entrepreneurs do this to a degree. It's just the ones who think, lucky for everyone here, I'm the superstar who's going to make this business, versus the ones who are like Brad Pitt in that movie Moneyball, where it's like, no, I'm here to make sure we get enough superstars to win this championship. Those ones more like the Brad Pitt, there's just they're further on that end of the spectrum of needing less
okay.
validation, more concerned about is this working for everyone else.
So that sets up this aspect of how do they feel and lead their team. Because what we know is when you're a $1 billion leader or a $10 billion leader, you didn't do it alone. You had many leaders and managers in a structure. So what have you heard about their commitment to their people or developing their staff to be as good as they can? So you talked about they listen, they reflect, they let their subconscious do their magic to look for the outlier because everyone's going to tell them what's good. But what about this next level down?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that is about like kind of putting your money where your mouth is, like setting the example where I can take CEOs of any different size, founders of any different size, and they will all talk a good game. Culture is what matters around here. We hire for attitude and work on skills. Like everybody regurgitates the same stuff. But then when you say, hey, at a more granular level, can you give me an example of that? A number of times these folks who built much higher performance organizations that have grown so much more, it's like they're not saying it so much because it's the buzzword. Like they genuinely believe it. It's like their conception of their job is less to be the superstar, and like their conception of their job is like um, to make this the place that's extremely magnetic for the highest performance people in our space that want to come work for us, and for the people who are here to like bring 121%. Like, how with employees, like they've got that discretionary effort. Like no boss has been
Yeah.
able to like build a good enough checklist for them to give 100%. Like maybe you can build a checklist to get 80% out of a staff. Maybe I would argue against that. But like that last 20%, they have to give it to you. Like no boss has been able to really figure out how to demand, give me your heart. And these ones who, and when I say set the example, it's like they talk about this culture stuff, they have the all hands, and they do what everybody else does from leadership of like the fire hose down. Oh, this is what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. They've got all the programs for everybody. But the ones I've been really impressed with, it's a priority for them to take it the other direction and to have folks lower down the totem pole than them tell them, I don't think you really live in the culture. And like they've made an environment safe enough for somebody like 2 levels down to say that to the boss. And
Yeah.
and the way they made it safe enough is the reaction when feedback like that comes back in. I had a
Yeah.
billion-dollar founder on last week who I can't remember what he said, but like I think he was willing to call his own fouls. Like somebody brought it up and he's like, they're right. And in fact, they're not going far enough. I should have done this and this. And he did something like, I wish I could remember right this second, but it was like, I can't remember if he like dressed up and did a dance in front of the whole company or something, but he did something like arguably embarrassing in front of everyone to prove the point that he wasn't exempt. And it's kind of that like actions speak louder than words thing.
Yes. Yes. So I want to just unpack that. I hate the word term, but I use it anyway. Unpack this a little bit. One of my dear friends works for SpaceX. And what he said is the mission of going to space is so big that that purpose brings people to give 120%. Now, Elon and his stuff has all sorts of issues. We're not there, but I think one of the things that you talked about, where does that incremental come from? First of all, does the purpose align to the people and their purpose? And have we hired the right one? And then I think the piece that you just brought up, which was, am I willing to be authentically vulnerable? I'm just a human. I put on my pants one leg at a time. While I might have the role, the bottom line is I'm just like you. But if you tell me I've made a mistake, please, because then we can have an organization that's safe and joyful, and I'm willing to be vulnerable and do a foolish thing because that makes a good, fun, good business.
Yeah, to
No.
maybe double down on that a little bit. One thing that I think so many of these leaders, founders that are so inspirational to me, there's those businesses that are more like just the cash cow. Like they're not really trying to grow. They're just trying not to lose. Like those organizations that are playing not to lose instead of playing to win, right? And a lot of times they're like, it's almost like they're doing culture or they're doing leadership training or they're doing this kind of development stuff for its own sake because you're supposed to. Where the ones that are super magnetic, everybody wants to work for them, their results are through the roof, is like they don't get the cart before the horse. Like it's not like, hey, we have a company so that we can provide good training for employees. Like we exist as a company so we can win best places to work for. Now, nobody would say that, but sometimes their actions almost signal that a little. There's some of these other organizations that are like, oh no, we're here to play the sport of serving our customers. Like this is a for-profit business and we're here for profit. Now, the best way to make a profit is to think about that last and think about our customers and our staff first. But I feel like so many of them, they forget that's like, some of them, it's like we're thinking about our staff first, last, and luckily we have customers so we can provide staff this good life. And it's like, oh, that's like one element of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. We're the ones who are like, I love Richard Branson so much, where he says, like, it's not customer first, it's staff first. If you treat your staff like gold, your staff will treat your customers like gold, right?
Yes. Yes.
But
yeah.
Richard's not like, this is not a social community. Like he's trying to make money, right? And so these ones who can tie it back to like, I think some of my favorite organizations, one was a airplane parts manufacturer who was selling to GE Aerospace. I think it was aerospace, and ended up getting the attention of Jack Welch, who was like arguably like the Steve Jobs of his time or the Elon Musk of his time, everybody right at that time. Jack Welch was so impressed with how he had worked with every single employee in the company and their managers so that everybody knew what they did and how it contributed to how we serve our customers. It wasn't just like, oh, we do this for our internal customer. It was like, everybody had been given some business education of like, here's a sport we're trying to win. Here's how what you're doing contributes to our whole company winning the whole game. Instead of like, oh, from the siloed thing and don't really know how the business model is. To the point that Jack Welch, while CEO of GE, becomes his business partner and buys into the company and they own a company together, right?
Yes.
And so it's like this, like, yes, culture, yes, people first. Treat your people so well, they'll treat your staff well. Treat your staff so well, they'll treat your customers well, right? But it's almost more like the special ops guys, where it's like, hey, like we need to defuse this nuclear bomb. Like we need to have a team. Everybody needs to feel loved and part of this team. We can't have like bad team dynamics, especially when other people are going to be shooting at us as we're trying to defuse a nuclear bomb, right? Like it's got to be team, but it's mission first of like, hey, this is a no-fail mission. And like selection is an ongoing process. Just because you were on the team doesn't guarantee you a spot going forward. Like this is for people willing to bring their A game. And those guys are so tight and they love each other legitimately, sometimes more than their own families or in different ways than their own families, right? But it's not for the sake of having the brotherhood. It's for the sake of saving people's lives and rescuing this hostage from ISIS, And if you can't step up and be the guy that this hostage needs to save her life, you just can't be on the team. And it sounds harsh. And in some ways it is, but in some ways it's not because it keeps people accountable. Anyways, that's more of an answer than you were looking for.
No, I thought it. So I want to just build on that. I met a young startup entrepreneur of a massage business franchise, and she had built the facility for the massage therapist. And I gave her such credit. Carpeting on the floor with extra padding, an app so she knew what to do. She had taken out every piece of friction for her massage therapists to make them happy so they could deliver an incredible experience to their customers, to their patients. And I said, now this woman understands culture. And then the irony on the other side that I have seen is we talk culture, but we're not going to spend the time to do it. In special ops, that they're going to spend time to be together, to have lunch together. That's what they do. But so much of leadership and businesses say, we don't have time for that. We can't go out to lunch. We got to get it done and get it done and get it done. Never remembering is the teamwork and the glue happens at the meal, the conversation, when the pressure is released. And that's that's how you create really an authentic culture or a beginning of connectivity, as you say. But businesses, they talk it, but as you say, they forget. No, one more, and I'll come back and then I'll open it back to you, is what sports team does not spend 80% of their time practicing with each other, watching game films, building bonds before they go play? None. But what business spends 80% of their time practicing their craft? They expect everyone to show up at 100%, and it's not even possible. And I find that really ironic. And as you said, you've seen it. I talk the culture, but I don't really authentically live it every day.
Russell, I know you're a big reader. Did you ever do Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code?
I did, under your suggestion. And you know what? That is a great book. Let's just talk about that for a second.
Well, okay, let's do that. But I just want to put in one plug first.
Okay.
His other book, The Culture Code. Have you done that one yet?
No, I've read The Talent Code. I have The Culture Code.
Okay. So in The Culture Code, it's exactly what you said. And it's like, so it's an NBA, one of those great stories in it is this NBA coach. I want to say it's the Spurs. That's where Tim Duncan played, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Bill Belichick, right?
I'm quite sure it's the Spurs, but this coach who's like, a pretty tough guy. Like it's not all puppies and roses, you know what I mean, right? But his players constantly talk about how he takes them aside and he really checks in on their life. And he's like, he sets a reservation and sends a player and his wife out for dinner for something when he didn't need to. And just this real love, and that's a word that most people shy away from in the corporate world. You know who doesn't shy away from it? The special ops guys. In fact, the higher you go up, the more elite, into the classified units, because again, these guys are volunteers at my charity or have been employees. I own a business with one of them. They used to be clients, when I would train their corporates. Those guys say the word love about 100 times more than I thought they would. And they're constantly, you're leaving and they're give you a meaningful hug and they're love you, brother. But they mean it. And I don't know, they're way more personal than you would think. Same with that sports story from the Culture Code. This coach is yes, they do all the the watching the game tapes, like you said, and all these things, but like digging into their life, like his players, he doesn't say I dig into their lives. The players say, wow, he just will not let me get by being unhappy. He will not, like it's like this level of connection with their humanity that I think is
So,
inspirational.
so I think if we bring this back, if you want 120% out of your team, a leader, a manager, employee, it doesn't happen by directive. It happens through having the courage to be vulnerable and to love. And in corporate America, they're so afraid to, as you say, use the word. We have so many issues, but when you're playing for life or death, love is there. When you're playing for $1 billion and an NBA championship, love is there. If you're playing to break through and grow to $10 billion, you got to love with all your heart every day to be there. And so I think that probably is a good element of what defines a magnificent leader from a good leader. There's many good leaders, but it's that heart and thinking about someone else other than yourself, which is hard. Many leaders don't have good emotional EQ.
Yeah. One thing I will add there, and it goes back to the time thing you brought up, is I see these very senior leaders, typically I'm talking to the CEO or founder CEO, right? And they will take on less direct reports so that they can fully give them that. And then the people who work for them, like, I mean, you don't need a crystal ball to realize, like, okay, so if I give a manager 11 direct reports, or, the most I've heard of, I think, is 27 direct reports, right? If you give them that, and then you give them a day job, how much care and stewardship does anybody think they're doing here, right?
Yeah.
And this idea about like being honest of like, hey, are we here to check the box, or are we here to like run circles around the competition? And those things are done different. Like if you're playing intramural sports, it's like nobody needs to practice, nobody needs to talk, they don't really need to be friends. Let's just get together and play this game and try to have a good time. And there's a lot of businesses that function like that. And then there's those businesses that are like, they're trying to do something that nobody else has done. Like they're trying to make meaningful change. And like, you don't have to be SpaceX going to the moon. I had this client, they have about $8 billion in assets. It's the Utah Transit Authority. Okay. And I loved how they got the people who changed the brakes on the trains to care. They went and shot these films of like the disabled people that get picked up who really didn't have that. I remember this one like tearjerker video they made. It was like, this guy doesn't really have family, disabled. The bus stop was too far from the house. And if they didn't have some of the services they have, this person would have just been stuck at home, depressed, is what they say, right? And because of the way UTA works, they're able to get this kind of a van to get them to the bus, and this is then their daily driver, and they sit right up at the front by the driver. And like this different abled person, okay, paraplegic, is like the light of that bus. And everybody who gets on that bus every trip can't wait to be around that guy. And he's just like leaking gratitude. And you would think that's like, oh, this is the PR team to get all the consumers to think UTA is great. No, it was for internal, to show it to the guys who are doing continuous improvement on like figuring out how to get the brakes serviced in 2 hours instead of 1 hour by backing them back to back. And, like all these things they have to do in the monotonous, so removed from like the single mom who like transit made all the difference for her. And they made this great video about the single mom. And it was like, I don't know. It was like the cult. It was like the religion. It was like the, hey, what you do matters. Everyone on this team made that possible. And like, it was wild to see their staff and people feel so invigorated, like, oh yeah, my job does matter. And I just thought it was great.
It's purpose beyond yourself. It's realizing that break change made something possible and you affected someone's life. I think it's too easy, depending upon your business, you forget the lives you impact, the people you work with, what you do, how does it cascade out of the business environment? And then of course, many leaders are playing for profit in that regard. I would like, go ahead, Jess, you can add to that because I want to come around to your nonprofit and talk to you about you a little bit, but please go ahead and build on that.
Well, my last one there was to your point about taking the time, they took the time and money to find out these amazing stories of their customers and go film them and have them made well. Like they actually had somebody who understood storytelling put this together. And then it wasn't just emailed to the staff. I hope some people watch this. Like they spent time, because I was actually at the break shop when I heard about this. They like take time to take those people and get in a room and talk about the pillars of the UTA and show the video then and then talk about it then, so that it wasn't like, so they know everybody saw it and that everybody got to hear their coworkers talk about why it mattered to them too. It's like this peer pressure of like, that was meaningful to me for this reason. And they weren't fixing brakes while they were doing that.
No. So there it is. The action spoke louder than the words. And employees, the workforce knows. If you're truly a culture and you're committing to yourself, I can see it. I can tell whether it's just lip service or we're really living it. What are you doing it or not? And you can't fool anybody. So if you think you're fooling it, but there's one other piece. I know I felt it personally. I had my own insecurity to get out and meet people. I know as a CEO having a staff of 400, I had to work really hard to feel like I mattered. I felt like, well, they don't want to talk to me. They got their own sort of thing. And I did realize over time it did matter and I needed to do it. And my assistant encouraged me to get out there. And I then had people come in and tell me their story. But I think some of it is your own reflection of, are you comfortable meeting someone who works for you, who wants to talk to you, but you might feel insecure yourself? So a little self-honesty can always go a long way. Maybe that's part of the humbleness of it all.
A hero of mine was a client. I had taken a break from finance for a couple of years and went to work for my consulting firm. And I had this client, his name was Van Zek. He was the bureau chief for the Bureau of Public Debt. So he's in charge of 16 trillion of debt for the country, right? And he basically got serious about his role as leadership and this idea of like walking the walk. And he worked incredibly hard to get as many things off his plate as possible so that he could go walk around, so he could go spend time with people. And in that very same scenario that you're talking about, he had these meetings that were like, if you feel like it, hey, come meet, the equivalent of the CEO, come meet with the bureau chief if you feel like it. And so it was this volunteer base. And he talked about what really mattered to him and like radical self-honesty and treating people like people and, looking for the ways when we sometimes objectify each other and then rationalize it and all this stuff, right? And he got this core nucleus of people who cared about that. And then they go back to the desk, people are like, where were you? Oh, I was with the boss. And what was that about? It was this and this. And it like, he helped make it contagious that way.
Yes.
And another thing too, like I've met with a lot of driving CEOs, whether they're a hedge fund, venture capital fund manager or a CEO or something, who they recognize like, sometimes the people stuff is not my strengths. Like I feel this. I do incredibly well with a super high performance staff member. Like we like attached to the hip. And guess what? I have other folks who work for me and work with me. My brother's my business partner. He is so good at making everybody feel valued all the time. And that's something I need to work on. But while I'm working on it, I just have somebody else who's better at it than me. Like we go to parties all the time. And we'll host parties and I like pick the person I want to talk to. Or if you go to Nick's parties, he's like making sure everybody's having fun, everybody's working. And I can't tell you times my wife's like, can't you be more like your brother? Can't you, And socially, I'm the outgoing guy. Like if we just meet on the street and he's more reserved and things. But when he's the host, he just like, he has this sense of stewardship of making sure that this is working for everyone else. And I'm so lucky at our company to be partnered with him because with all the staff, like he's so good at caring about their problems and making them feel the belonging. And sometimes I have to work on that. And so like hiring for your weaknesses is something that I think a lot of leaders, they just feel guilty that they're not good at that part and try to ignore it or try to work on it instead of filling the hole with people who have this.
And I would say it's not hiring for your weakness. It's creating your complement. It's creating your wingman, your wing woman. Because everyone has a yin and a yang. My CFO was an incredible strategic partner to me and taught me so much, things I couldn't do and things I would do, or my president, who was so much more of a relationship person, she would be my wing woman and encourage me. And as you say, your brother encourages you. So I think knowing thyself and then recognizing what we're good at and when we need support, because our strength is our strength and our gap we can fill, but we'll never make it our strength. We just need to have a good complement. Just, I want to spend time just on your nonprofit, because when we first met, not only was I impressed with how many people you've met and the business you've built and the businesses you helped and the knowledge that you've gained from these 900 interviews and people, but it's just a commitment you and your wife have made to helping children in need through trafficking and exploitation, and the fact that you started a nonprofit organization. And when I really read under the bio, the truth is, hey, Grace Stroke, our podcast production company, is really meant as an engine to allow us to do social good. So I think it'd be important. You are an incredible human. I'd like you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, you think about all my companies. I've got a longevity biotech venture capital fund. We've got a real estate fund. We've got the production company where we make the videos and podcasts for Bloomberg and all these CEOs and stuff, right? And really, like, my two big goals in life are to have enough money to pay all the Delta Force and FBI guys and all the folks who train police and have helped us with countering child trafficking in those years, because money is always the bottleneck for the good we're trying to do there. To have enough money to pay to do all that child rescue stuff I want to do, and have enough money left over to also make movies. These are my big bucket list things. The shooting for the stars, right? But it's like a bug. I in high school I found out someone incredibly close to me had been sexually abused, and I was like, just shocked. Like, I was like, this person, she's like a sister to me, and I don't know. I thought that happened to other people. Like, I didn't, I don't know. It just caught me off guard. And then that same year, I found out about another super, super close friend that had happened to her as well. And I was just like, kind of devastated. I was like, anyways, it just really stuck with me. And so about 21, I was working on some business stuff, and I went to some business conference, and this guy says that he thinks God gave everyone a purpose in life. And if you don't know what it is, that he might have given you a hint. It might be whatever makes you the angriest. And it was just like a lightning bolt. I was like, oh, I know what that is.
Very interesting.
That's people renting out kids to other adults to be abused for money. That makes me the angriest. And I just haven't been able to, that was, 23 years ago. And I haven't been able to get rid of that feeling even when I wanted to. And, unfortunately, my wife's family had this happen. Her mom was a trafficking victim in Santa Monica, California, and was the fourth generation in their family. So my wife's great-great-grandma got taken advantage by a guy in Kentucky when she was a really young teenager. And then when she had her name's Reen, when she had my wife's great-grandma Ann, he started renting her out to people, and he started renting Reen out to people in town. Then when Ann got to be a teenager, a very young teenager, he started renting her out too. They ran away, end up in Chicago, and just these cycles, like, they end up being re-exploited in Chicago, and then Joyce is born, my wife's grandma, who I knew. And same thing. I mean, the kind of men that have been around for 20 years now. Joyce starts getting hurt as a little kid and then gets pushed into it for money in her early teenage years. They all moved to California. And again, now it's been going on for 20-something plus years. And so my mother-in-law gets hurt as a little kid. I mean, one guy got prosecuted when she was in the first grade, but none of the others. And then 12 gets pushed into doing it for money. And at 13, her mom ended up abandoning her and her younger brother in a motel in Santa Monica. And about a month later, the hotel owner said, hey, I just can't let you keep living here for free. And I'm like, why wasn't he calling child services? But Lori got her younger brother on a bus to Northern California to live with their grandma. And she just kind of lived under the pier in Santa Monica and with some street kids, and was a little bit part of their family. And she's actually still in touch with them. We had one of them up to come stay at our house during Christmas with her, and that's lifelong friendship of 50 years that's stuck. But I mean, you can imagine what, medicating on the streets of LA looked like as a teenager and getting in all sorts of trouble. And
yes.
So even though her life had a lot of sadness over the years, she was fierce that this was not going to happen to her daughter. And, my wife grew up around some really crazy stuff, um, but it didn't happen to her. And she was the first in that line to ever go to college. And I'm actually the first dad to stick around in 20 years in that line. And my mother-in-law is just this transformational character who changed everything for her family line. And her kids and her grandkids had a completely different life because of her bravery to stand up for it. And so it's just close to home for us, and we wanted to do what we could. And so over the last 15 years, we've done a bunch of different programs, from aftercare facilities and youth programs and law enforcement training. We're focused on some FBI trainings for police right now that we're facilitating.
I think it's wonderful. And you talked about you train special ops people. I mean, you really commit to help those people who can find it and try to stomp this out. And that's a tremendous dedication.
Yeah, our big push this year is taking counterintelligence techniques. Like if you watch a cop show, you know how they get an informant and they're like, if you do this, we'll pay you some money, and if you don't, we'll put you back in jail. It's kind of like blackmail, like a carrot and stick, but pretty heavy on the stick, right?
Yeah.
When I've had like 25 year CIA case officers on the show, for them, there's no stick. It's only carrot. Like they make friends, so this is like somebody in the nuclear program at a hostile government, right? They become friends, like real friends, and they haven't told them everything about themselves, and they're trying to get this nuclear person to say, hey, I don't, I think my company needs nuclear for our energy, but I think the people who are running my country are traitors. Them building these nuclear weapons are going to wreck life for all of us, and I wish there was something I could do about it. And he's saying, hey, what if I could help you with that? I haven't told you everything about myself, right?
Yeah.
There's no blackmail. It's not like how the Russians or Chinese do compromise, that kind of stuff, right? And so that's a skill set. We're looking to teach an unclassified version of that course to law enforcement who maybe they're going, it's like how they get the mafia on like a RICO case, right? So they might be going after some of the more organized crime groups in the country and gangs in the country who they're selling drugs, they're selling guns, but they're also selling kids, right? And it's like, we want to bring those counter intel people to come teach regular cops, how do you recruit a source in this gang that can stay there for 5 years or 6 years and give like bust after bust after bust after bust? And we're super excited for the pilots this year. And we've got some donors. We just need a few more. And we're going to run the pilot program on that. Super excited. It's a 6-month program. It's about $3,000 an officer.
Okay, good.
And thank you for donating to Child Rescue.
You're welcome. Listen, children matter. Their impact is there. There's very few. It doesn't get much notice in the media. It kind of gets blushed over. And the fact that you've created a nonprofit and committed your life to it. And I just want you to, what's the name? Let's go with the name of the association.
Yeah,
Again,
Child Rescue Association.org.
childrescueassociation.org. So for anybody listening to the donation, you're going to feel good about it. That's the beauty of giving a donation, is it makes you feel good. It's a very selfish act because you're helping great people do great things. And Jess, I'd like to just come back and close on this. There are leaders coming up behind us. You've shared some beginning wisdom. If you had to wrap it all up and say, hey, you really are trying to blaze a new trail, you're trying to break through, you're authentically committed. If I had to share advice to you and give you 3 things to be a great trailblazer from all of the lessons and people I've spoken to, what might that be?
I'm going to give the response in books, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. You've given me a great book, so please.
So advice number 1 is from the book, The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. About this idea that most of the things we do are of very nominal value. They're of very little value. Checking our email, right? And then every once in a while, we do this thing that's like $1,000 an hour work or $10,000 an hour work. But a lot of our life is stuck with $5 an hour work and $15 an hour work. So we can, right? And so this idea of like thinking harder and pulling back to, hey, that lunch meeting where we got a $100,000 client that took an hour? That's arguably $100,000 an hour work or some form of it, right? And so like rethinking in terms of what are the incredibly high impact things I can do and get out of the busy work and have AI or a virtual assistant or somebody do that. And then teaching team members to do the same thing. The second one is what we touched on a bit, the talent code. Just the science of how experts become experts the fastest, and that you need to do meaningful repetitions outside the comfort zone with a scoreboard to know how well you're doing, and that nothing great ever came fast, but just by practicing doesn't guarantee you'll get there. Like you need to practice the right way. And so looking into, myelination in the brain. And so, talent code,
Yes.
Peak by Anders Ericsson, there's many in this genre, but this idea of like, okay, I say I want to get good at this, but does my schedule line up with my stated goals? Like, am I putting in the meaningful repetitions outside of my comfort zone? Like, what is it about my calendar that would suggest that this really is my priority? And then the third one would be these books that changed my life from the Arbinger Institute. But the guy who founded his name's Terry Warner. His book is called Bonds That Make Us Free. And it's a little heavier, but it's this concept of like how most of the people problems in life don't come from what we said or did. They came from how we were thinking about that person when we said it or did it. And that it's like, I can compliment you, but if I think you're a piece of dirt while I'm doing it, you're going to be able to see through, right? Or I can say the wrong thing to you, but if I genuinely love you, you're going to be able to sense it and you're going to give me a pass. And how often we have this sense of like what we should do for others versus what does Jess feel like doing. And we all have this ratio. Sometimes we choose this and sometimes we choose that. And at these times when I choose to do what I feel like doing instead of what I actually think I should do when I'm honest with myself, that I now have this new fork in the road. Okay, well, now that I'm feeling guilty for not doing what I thought I should do, am I going to go back and make it good, or am I going to rationalize it? And often I rationalize it, just like the rest of us. Well, that feeling of guilt doesn't go away. It's like making credit card payments. Like I have to keep rationalizing. And that rationalization about like, well, they shouldn't have done this, so I shouldn't have had to do that for them. And, like all these lawyering up I do in my head, that just creates distance, that creates problems, that creates unhappiness. And me willing to like indulge the radical self-honesty of finding my own leadership blind spots is typically the most powerful part of solving any problem. And, what's business besides solving problems?
Yeah. Well, clearly, your self-honesty about what got you angry as a source of passion, which I love, and your commitment to knowledge and leadership growth, personal growth, and leadership vulnerability, which maybe we'll discuss at another time, and just your caring to share other people's stories. Doing 900 podcasts and sharing their words to others is another huge commitment. And of course, as you said, that's on behalf of helping the children. I think it speaks volumes for who you are and your character as an individual. And so I just want to close by saying thank you. I feel really honored to have met you. I feel really privileged to be able to have this conversation and to be a part of your life. So I thank you for being here with me today.
Well, I have to maybe return it a bit. I think that there's so many folks who built $100 million businesses that then golf the rest of their life away. And I've been inspired by the way that you want to take all those lessons and like help bring people up and help people achieve what they're trying to achieve when you have the options not to. And I think that says a lot about your character, that you put so much of your heart into this business. So thanks for having me.
It was really insightful to talk about what you learn from these multi-billion-dollar leaders in terms of what is authentic leadership and how do they get there. And the fact that the greatest of leaders have this deep humility about themselves, they're willing to be vulnerable, they have a deep, authentic love for their people, to build a team in which people bring 120% of themselves to the business. It's not lip service. They live it. They are looking to build culture and give the time and money and resources to create a culture where people are passionate about the work they do and care about each other and their customers. I also love the fact that we spoke about listening for the friction, that they know they're surrounded by people telling them all the good things that they're doing, but they spend the time to hear is, well, what's not working? What are those people didn't say? What is the data saying? And how do I need to not be so busy, but to reflect on it to be able to find the insight that's going to make that business that much better, where I can be playing for the true big dollar, not just playing the game to win, to have fun. And I also am grateful for you sharing really the wisdom of great books, the Talent Code, the Culture Code, the book from the Harbinger Institute about the bonds that we make, and the rule of 80-20, how much we spend our time doing things that don't really matter. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us to the end. I want to give you our special gift. It is sitting at the Kern and Partners website. That's Kern and Partners spelled out. It is our ultimate collection of the magnificent Advantage resources. This is filled with the guides and tips and behaviors to help you transform good managers into magnificent managers. So just go to the website and download it. It is packed with information I'm sure you're going to find of value. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Trailblazing Leaders podcast. If you want to check out more episodes, you're going to find them on all major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. The podcast is also available at our website at kernandpartners.com. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you on our next episode.